All right. My name is Ethan Vandehei, and today I am interviewing Mitch. And Mitch is going to introduce himself. Mitch, why don't you tell me your full name and where you work?
Yeah, sure. So, name is Mitchell Groth. I'm a staff pharmacist. I work at Guardian Pharmacy of Wisconsin.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mitch. Can you dive into a little bit about what you do
Sure.
at this role in your organization and
Yeah,
what your organization does?
yeah. So, in general, we're not like your normal pharmacy. Technically, we're like a long-term care pharmacy. So, we deal with patients who are in assisted living centers, skilled nursing, um, like group homes. We do have some patients who live out of their own homes as well, but mostly we're like doing compliance packaging. We're considered like a closed door pharmacy, so we don't have like patients coming to us. We have our own like delivery staff. We have our own billing team. What I do there as a like I'm just on the pharmacist team, so I'm running departments of like technicians, running pharmacist queues, basically clinically checking things, visually checking things, making sure it's right drug, right patient, right time, not going to kill anyone. And
Mhm.
then we communicate directly with the facilities via like faxes over the phone, and we have to talk to like doctors, nursing staff to get orders, change orders, and just clarify things in general. So it's a wide array of things,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
a
It
lot
sounds
of like it's a lot of teamwork. It's not really individualized. I'll put it that way.
okay. Yeah. So it sounds pretty busy. And Mitch, how long have you been there?
I'm going on 5 years in October, so like four and a half.
Okay. And is Guardian Pharmacy a Milwaukee business or is this somewhere else?
So technically, Guardian is nationwide. There's not as much on the West Coast, but I want to say there's over 40 pharmacies in probably over 30 different states.
Okay.
So it's a large company. What Guardian basically does is they find other long-term care pharmacies or independent pharmacies, and they basically buy them, merge them into the Guardian name. So we still operate like independently. We still have our own say in what we want to do, but technically we're under the Guardian name.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So that also means you'll be able to have some decisions and be a part of that decision-making process, which is cool.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about your educational background from how you got to, schooling to,
Sure.
your background to where you are today?
Yeah. So for basically, I have like a doctorate of pharmacy. So what I had to do was out of high school, I went to University of Wisconsin Eau Claire. You can do.
Hey, that's where I went, baby.
Hey, baby, did you really?
Yeah, yeah. That's
No
what I'm
way.
doing the MBA program through.
No way. Yeah, dude, I loved it up there. It was fun as hell.
It
It
was,
was a
yeah.
great time. That's where I met Tanner too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to tell him that.
Yeah, I played softball. We were in like chemistry classes and all that together.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I met Tanner. And then we played like intramural softball. Um,
Oh, nice. Okay, that
yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Yep. But no, I did 3 years there. I basically just did my prereqs. So pharmacy, it's a little different than like getting like a doctoral in like medicine, because if you want to go be a doctor, you have to go and do 4 years of undergrad, where this is technically you just need to complete prereqs and you can apply. And if you get accepted, you don't need your bachelor degree to go in. So most people do get a bachelor's. I just did my prereqs, applied to a bunch of schools. I got accepted and I went. So
Okay,
then after Eau Claire, I went to Concordia. I was going between Madison and Concordia, and I went to Concordia and did, my 4 year doctoral degree there.
okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Was that, pretty difficult?
Yeah. It, it was very difficult.
I was
I
gonna
would
say
say it was probably one of the harder things I've done. It's just very intensive. They make you do 21 plus credits, a semester, and a lot of it is just very science intensive. So
wow.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was good. It was good. It was really hard, but it was good.
awesome. Yeah, it's good to hear that it was rewarding. So,
Yeah.
um, in your view, obviously, you are in the industry that I'm kinda talking about today, which is,
Mhm.
the healthcare type industry.
Yep.
and there's a lot of, trends and issues, but I kind of want to ask you today, what are, the three most significant trends or issues currently affecting your organization?
Yeah. Pharmacy in general is kind of a weird organization where you have a lot of like highly trained professionals, and then you can have a lot of staff who have like minimal training, like they can come right out of high school and technically be a technician, have like
Okay.
zero certifications, things like that. So one of your big things that plagues every pharmacy, no matter what, is staffing on like a technician level. Because pharmacists, you can do almost everything as a pharmacist, but you don't have the time to. So you need like a massive team of technicians to get a lot of your work done. So the technician turnover right now in like one of our departments, which is a more intensive department, it's like our order entry.
Okay.
We just don't have the best staffing there right now. So because we don't have that great staffing, you're slowing down order processing, which is slowing down production, which is slowing down like delivery. It just slows everything down, and it changes. We have to figure out workflow and change workflow all the time to help compensate for that. So right now, staffing in the tech department is big.
Okay.
Another thing that plagues us all the time in our specific industry of pharmacy is onboarding new business and then technically losing business. So you can, let's talk about like losing business. Losing business for us is you could do nothing wrong, and the assisted living group, let's say it's 5 different facilities, hundreds of patients that you're servicing.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, that group gets bought out by another assisted living group. If that new assisted living group has a preferred pharmacy, they automatically transfer to that new pharmacy, and you have no say. So you can
Wow.
have a client where you're doing a lot of business, a lot of dollars, a lot of meds, and you're not doing anything wrong, and you just lose them out of the blue. So that's super tough where you try to do as much as you can to, let's say, make like do anything you really can to help your clients, because you can lose them so easily. So that losing business is tough, and then onboarding business. Let's say you pick up a facility, you have to onboard potentially hundreds of patients in a matter of a couple weeks,
Yeah.
things like that. I mean, that's hundreds to thousands of meds that you have to type in. You have to contact doctors. You got to get scripts. You got to get everything approved through insurances. Then we just have to process it, fill it, do all that internally. It's a lot of man hours. So handling that in a short like turnaround time is pretty difficult, I would say. And then the other thing, since we're closed door pharmacy, we do everything like through delivery. Our other big thing that's the toughest and affects us on like a day to day is just going to be our communication with the facilities and staff members. So, like, let's say you're getting new orders, med changes, problems where you can't get meds to a patient. You can't always make a call to a facility because we're servicing thousands of patients. You're not going to be able to call every single time. So, we have to figure out specific processes on how we communicate. But let's say the facility doesn't look at a fax, they don't see this, they don't see that. To them, they're just missing something. They're gonna get dinged on an audit. Like they're gonna get fined by the state, stuff like that. So it
Yeah.
makes it really tough that we have to constantly like revamp how we communicate issues with facilities and work on like internal processes of how to do that effectively.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How, how are those challenges, issues, how are they shaping, your company's strategic, priorities for the next 2, 3 years? So what are you doing for these 2, 3 years to kind of figure out those issues?
Basically, what we have to do is we have different departments that work on everything. So, I
Yep.
mean, on a day to day, I'm more dealing with your day to day issues, your day to day problems. But then we also have sales teams, administration teams, where they're kind of, we'll field calls and issues. And if it's something bigger where we can't solve it on like an individual basis right then and there, we have to send it up to like someone a little higher where they'll look at the issue, they'll come together as a group, and we might have to change like a whole procedure or process altogether. They
Oh,
usually come up with a plan. What they'll then do is usually present stuff to like, let's say, a pharmacist team. And then as the pharmacist team, we'll review it, see if it's even going to make sense for us. and then we'll implement it from there. It's tough to say like on a 2 to 3 year. A lot of our problems are how can we solve this within a couple weeks?
Okay.
It's either we're not going to communicate with them, someone's going to miss meds, someone's going to get hurt. So it's a really like time sensitive thing.
Yeah.
Our 2 to 3 year issues are usually like, how are we gonna get this facility from this one group over to us? Like, how are we gonna service this one thing? So that's more of our 2 to 3 year, where I'd say everything we need to do, we need to probably figure out within a month period.
Okay.
Our big 2 to 3 year stuff is really like, maybe we need to open a new pharmacy. How are we gonna do that? Maybe we need to like onboard a new facility that we're trying to like, we don't have them as clients yet, but how are we going to get them as clients?
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's that's kind of what I was thinking though too, is like, same thing in my space. It's like, you got to solve the problem now or you're never going to solve it. So
yeah, it's kind of like, I'm more dealing with like the immediate problem now. Yeah. The order now is where we have our administration teams. We're there trying to figure out, how do I bring in this whole like assisted living group? How do we get them over to our business? Things like that.
Do you know like how you think they would even do that, or not really?
Get someone over?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like business in general, where first of all you have to try to know people. So you have to get into the facilities. So we literally just have guys going there trying to talk to people. Let's say like flu season's coming up.
Okay.
We'll send teams to do like vaccinations for all the residents. So then you have someone in the door and you're like, hey, look, we were able to do this pretty easily for you. We can do even more. This is what we offer. It's kind of just trying to get your foot in the door, like any other business would be.
I was going to say.
You're making calls. Even if you don't have their business, we're talking to them potentially on a regular basis of, what are your problems like? Are they being solved for you currently? We could offer you this, things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What is your kind of, day-to-day, like walk me through your typical decisions making process for like, something major, right? That you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So that's where it goes back to kind of what I mentioned before, where it's really like departmental. So if I'm on the floor and it's a facility's calling and they're having this huge issue, I have to figure out, can I give you, is it like a clinical issue? Is it a procedural issue? Is it this? If it's clinical, I'm going to solve it. If it's minor procedural something, I'm usually going to be able to solve it. If it's a big procedural something where we need to change, let's say like a whole delivery route, something like that, or we need to implement something different procedurally that's completely different than what we're doing now, I probably can't solve it right then and there. I have to bring it up to, let's say like our pharmacy manager. I'll shoot her a message and I'll be like, this is what's going on. This is how we do it now. It's not working for them.
Got it.
And then she'll usually try to problem solve with the other supervisors to be like, these are our capabilities. Can we make a change in general? And if they can make a change, they'll kind of come up with an idea. And then every single time they come up with an idea, they bring it to the pharmacist.
Gotcha.
Because I think the pharmacists in general, our whole team is like 15 of us. We kind of have the best idea of how everything's operating in the pharmacy on a day-to-day. And we'll know like capabilities wise, are we capable of making this change? And then we know how to implement it the best. So we have pharmacist meetings every week where we go through issues, we go through problems. They'll bring it up there and then we'll kind of implement what we think will work best. And then they'll bring it to the other departments from there and implement that change from there.
Does your, position have any, like when those changes and people come to you, asking if you like this or what they suggest or you suggest, do you do any like, is there any framework or any methodology or something that you kind of like think back to when you are trying to make these decisions? Or is it just like, all right, I got to think of this on the fly?
A lot of times it's on the fly, but in reality, like we know our workflow really well. And we know kind of like pharmacy is set. Basically, there's like specific laws we have to follow. There's kind of a specific procedural data, like workflow in general that we need to follow to get things done. So we're always referring back to that. Doesn't make sense with the law, what we're doing. Like, are we breaking any laws? am I going to change something that's going to slow us down in general? I'm kind of like referring back to our current workflow right now.
Yeah.
And we are going to know like the change that we're going to make. Is it going to hinder us or is it going to improve something? So we're always referring back to our current protocol and if it's better than that or if it's worse than that. And that's kind of like our baseline. There's no like specific methodology in like the pharmacy business world, I should say, that
Yeah.
you really need to follow. It's pharmacy business is like, it's all over the place, man.
Yeah.
It's like, it's more like, how can we process this to make sense for the law and clinically and then workflow?
Gotcha. So, like when you were bringing up all these challenges and like things that you go through on a day-to-day basis, sometimes it feels like that. Do
Yeah.
you like have one of recency that happened this week since it's Thursday? Like, is there something that happened this week that you had to like address or face?
I would say my best example would be it probably wasn't like within this last week, but within this last year, it was a big change where
Okay.
like it affected a lot. Where the DEA came in and they basically prevented pharmacies or pharmacists from changing certain things on like a controlled substance prescription.
Okay.
So let's say we got a script that came in and it was missing certain like requirements that they usually need. We could usually finesse and add them ourselves. Or a lot of times, we could call over to the doctor's office and be like, hey, you're missing this. Are you good with me adding this? Or blah, blah, blah. And we were able to make these changes. Now they don't let us change anything. So what we're really stuck doing is anytime something's missing, you have to call over to the provider, be like, hey, you wrote this wrong, or hey, this is dosed wrong, or hey, you forgot to write the patient address, or hey, you forgot your DEA number. Things like little tiny things. Hey, you forgot to write that this is a tablet versus a capsule, which I know what it is, but they didn't write it on there specifically. Like in the past, I would have just wrote it really quick and no one would have known the difference. Or I could have said like, hey, they provided this. I can't even do that now. So they need to then rewrite the whole thing, resend it over to us or refax it or remail it. And then we need to go from there. So because of that, there's a delay in treatment. There's a delay in like just processing everything.
Could their response take like days to get back to you? Or like
Yeah,
weeks?
sometimes.
Oh, wow.
So we basically had to come up with a whole new workflow, how we were going to communicate with providers. We first of all like sent out communications to all the main provider hubs that we like work with or get scripts from in general to tell them like, hey, this is the law that changed. You guys need to be aware of this. We can't really help you as much as we helped you in the past. Like we're going to have you resend all this stuff. So then we came up with like new internal procedures of just when this comes across, how are we going to handle it? What are we going to do? Do we need to call? Can we change something ourselves? And then basically our next big thing was we just had to enforce the changes, man, because people in the medical field, you've had people doing some things for years and years and years. And now there's this one big change. And a lot of times people don't remember that or they're not going to do it. But if we don't do that, you're going to get an audit and you're going to get huge fines, things like that.
Got it. That's
so
crazy.
It's going to be illegal for you to be doing it basically. So we then had to enforce all this stuff, and it's taken months for just everyone to get basically down to this is what's going on. The providers are now pretty good with, if I'm missing something, I'm going to rewrite it. They get it over to us quick, but it took a long, long time, probably 6 months plus, to just people kind of being on the same page.
Wow.
So that was a big thing that's taken a lot of time and a lot of effort.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Do you know, like, is there an outcome to this right now, or is there still it's still undecided?
It's still like, I mean, basically the outcome is you need to do this or we can't fill the med.
Yeah.
So there really is no alternative. It's you have to make this change or we can't fill this because it's illegal.
Yeah.
We can't fix it. It's just you get mixed results now where some providers comply really well. They do a good job of it. Some don't. So it falls on us then spending a lot of our time trying to call over and get things adjusted and fixed because we play the middleman then, where everyone's mad because we're not sending it out, when in reality we can't really do anything about it. So right now it's kind of a mixed bag, but I think a lot of people at this point know what's going on and the changes has been made. It's just not completely there yet. It's going to be, another 6 months of new providers and everyone that's coming into the field learning the law too. So
yeah. So, I mean, obviously your background shows you went to school, you got educated, you've been doing this for a while. You said, you're almost on 5 years. So, is there a way for you to like foster a culture of innovation and adaptability at where you work to kind of keep chugging along with these changes and, issues that keep happening?
I think the big thing that saves us is, I kind of brought it up before. It's like our departmental meetings.
Yeah.
We have those departmental meetings every week.
Okay.
If there's so many changes with what's going on with our facilities, what's going on with procedures, what's potentially changing in laws, that without these meetings, no one's going to be on the same page. No one's going to know. We're never going to be able to implement any changes we want to make because, like I said, it's going to start with your administration. They're going to bring it up to the pharmacist, and then we figure out how to do everything with the workflow. And then from there, other departments have their meetings where we talk about the same things, and it just kind of cascades down.
Yeah.
So I think all of those departmental meetings, all stemming from like the top group, bringing it to the pharmacist and making that change, that really is what implements everything. Without that, you're trying to communicate to a couple, 130 people at a pharmacy. Hey, you need to fill this one way because this one law changed, or because this is what's happening at the facilities. No one's going to always read their email or see that. Like, we have to have these meetings to get this stuff done.
For sure. For the technicians you manage and watch over, is there steps or like ways you can like improve their, role or like job, like to be faster, quicker, more efficient?
Yeah. I mean,
do you tell them anything, like recommend, like, hey, try this, do this?
Yeah, I mean, the technicians honestly bring stuff to us nonstop all day long, like issues they're having, questions that they're having, things like that.
Yeah.
So the pharmacist, everything goes to the pharmacist first because we have all the procedures down pat, because we have to. That's how we check everything, verify everything. So it kind of just comes down to like training, and it's like, hey, if you see this type of order where it's doing this type of thing, looks this type of way at this type of facility, every time you do this, do it this way. You know what I mean? Or it's like, it's all based on experience, where I kind of have to have a lot of one-on-ones with technicians.
Oh, nice. Okay.
To not necessarily like pull them into a room and go over things. It's just on the fly. It's kind of like, hey, I noticed you've been missing this. And then I'll just explain what's going on. And does this make sense? What don't you get? Let's go. Let's try it. And then they're going to be at their specific role, let's say the entire day. So they're going to see it multiple times. They're going to come across us again. So if I see if people are missing it, I can talk to them again about it or bring up a change. If someone's really like doing something like a big issue, they're not following what I'm talking about, I can always bring it up to a supervisor where they can have like a more formal training on something. But usually it's on the fly. Let's talk about this quick. This is what's going on. This is what you're missing. Let's make this adjustment really fast.
Yeah.
Our big thing is our onboarding with training takes a long time. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of like rules to learn, a lot of like laws,
regulations. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. The big thing I think for us is, I think you need like a reason behind everything. I can't just tell someone to do something. Mm-hmm. My big thing is I need to tell you why we're doing it so that it makes sense to you. And it's not just like, hey, someone told me to do this one time just because.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's the big thing for us. But it's our departmental meetings, and then implementing it one-on-one. The pharmacists are basically your managers in every area that you work. Yeah. So if you notice someone is not doing something that you talked about, you need to bring it up. Otherwise, it's never going to change.
I forgot to ask you, how big is your team that you kind of oversee and watch?
Depends. So like, I used to manage the order entry department before we merged, And then they didn't want pharmacists managing anyone anymore. So they made like technician supervisors in each area.
Okay.
But in general, like our pharmacy is, I think we're 135 people.
Wow.
But when you're in specific areas, let's talk about order entry anyway. There's probably 8 order entry technicians, and there could be like 5 pharmacists in that area. So you could have 2 direct technicians working right next to you all the time. In other areas, you could have 5. It just depends kind of where you are and how many people are around you. A lot of times it's a smaller group around you. So at max, I would say you got 4 or 5 people directly working around you that you could like influence right away.
Yeah. So obviously there's different departments at your place of work.
Yeah.
Do you think there's like an effective way that you guys can get aligned that maybe you currently don't do right now that you're like, man, I've thought of this idea. Like if we could have just tried to implement this strategy, this would be great.
Yeah, I think what we need to do is, you know how everyone has like their chat system that they use?
Yeah.
So like we use Teams as our
Yep.
like, chat
Teams,
system.
yeah.
We have some departments that rely on it completely, and without it, like they're lost because that's the most effective way you're going to talk to someone across the building.
Okay.
You have a lot of other departments where they don't use it effectively whatsoever and aren't trained to be really using it. So you have people basically walking things over back and forth when they have problems or questions. I think for us, our big thing is if we can implement like using Teams throughout the entire pharmacy, even for someone, let's say in fulfillment, if you have a problem, instead of walking it all the way up to a pharmacist in the front, when you're all the way in the back, use Teams, talk to me that way. We can figure this out quick, where that isn't really necessarily being done right now. And there's a lot of time wasted and potentially like miscommunication or people not seeing things because they won't even talk to someone about it or just message them quick. So I think for us, our big thing is if we implemented Teams more effectively throughout the entire pharmacy.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because then 1, you're documenting it.
Yeah.
Like 2, then like, they're not going to be like, remember that one time where I said this?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
that's like the worst.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you have, like I said, we're doing like thousands of orders every day potentially. If someone has one quick thing and then the next day they're like, hey, remember that one order where I brought that up? Do you remember what happened? No. But if you would have Teams me, I could have looked at our chat real quick and I could have remembered that,
Yeah.
Things like that. It is more effective if everyone's using it.
When it comes to the stakeholders and, the high-end executives at the pharmacy, do you think there's something that they could do to implement that would help solve those giant challenges we talked about today? Like that maybe you've talked about it with other coworkers or maybe like your wife just frequently like, man, if, higher, the stakeholders or higher management did, XYZ, we could solve so many issues in a heartbeat.
So here's the tough thing with that is for us, we operate really independently from, let's say, like our big stakeholders.
Okay.
So the one good thing with us is a lot of our changes that we need to make, we make all of that ourselves on like the pharmacy level. They can provide like insight or let's say like maybe funding or tell us if it's going to be feasible like in a budget or something.
Okay.
But if we need to make a change, we do it all ourselves. So that's the one good thing. I think in general, to rely mostly on kind of that question and how it would affect us, I would think what they kind of do now is they'll shoot out an email and they'll be like, hey, this is what's going on. And they expect everyone to be looking at their email. But you got people in like these smaller departments. No one's necessarily doing that. I think sometimes what businesses don't do, what they should do is you need to have a meeting. You need with like your main administration team at the direct location. You need to come up with your plan. You need to relay that plan literally verbally to everyone. And then you need, and with like reasons of why you're doing it. Like I said, everything needs to have a reason. Otherwise, no one's going to care. And then you
Yep.
need your managers. So like, let's say our pharmacists now, they need to make sure it's being enforced. So if someone's not following that procedure, someone's not following that rule, you need to bring it up. Because a lot of times you see an email and you don't care. It's like, oh, great. That's could be important. I'm not going to change what I'm doing on a day to day because no one's making me do it. And I don't know why I'm doing it. It's just someone over an email told me to do that. So I think all businesses, including ours, a lot of times, you need to have that set plan. You need to enforce the plan, and you need to have reasons of why you're doing it. And everyone needs to be in the loop, and then not just have it be done over, like, let's say, an email.
Yeah.
It needs to be done like directly.
For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, everything you've said today seems pretty, very sure valid. And especially since you're kind of in a leadership position coming from a leader, as you have to make decisions on the fly, work with a team, and, collaborate a lot and try to balance all these, constant issues and, whatever else is going on within the organization. So, Mitch, is there like anything else you want to either share that's a trend or an issue or a decision-making strategy or an organizational challenge that you didn't cover that I want to make sure gets covered before we conclude this?
The only thing, so when I was like trying to figure out the business in general and just outside of like, because we deal with a lot of like what's going on clinically in workflow.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of that. I didn't understand fully a lot of things that were happening with the business. Kind of one thing that has affected me, not really affected me, but it's just made me realize why we do some of the things that we do, is I would look at things based on like, are we profiting off of this necessarily? Or is this really beneficial for us? We do a lot of work for this, but we don't really receive much benefit, it seems like. But behind the scenes, we're doing some of these things, even though we might not be making a lot of money off of it, or it takes a lot of time. You're doing it because you're maintaining a client, first of all, because they have a need for it. And there's some sort of relationship potentially behind the scenes there. The reason why you're doing that if you weren't, you could be affecting your business somehow. So like my example is we have a ton of hospice business.
Okay.
So our reimbursement on a lot of these hospice meds, very minimal. We have to be on call. Like a lot of people are on call. Like you rotate a week on, and you're on call 24/7. So you can get called at 4 a.m. And it's like for something that we might not make any money or lose money on by having someone go in, fill, send a driver, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always like, why do we keep this business? Like, what's the point of doing this? We're making very minimal money off of this. The reason is a lot of these facilities, it's elderly patients, man. So
yeah,
you have the hospice nurses there directly intertwined with a lot of this facility staff where they're like, hey, we want this pharmacy's business because they have hospice service and they'll go in and do this for us. You need to keep this pharmacy. Whereas if we didn't do that, I mean, they could just go and potentially try another pharmacy on a whim, or we could lose business because of it.
Yeah.
No one has ever brought that up. No one's ever said that. I literally talked to one of our clinical teams that was at a facility, and they were like, oh, yeah, no, these nurses work directly with that staff, and they talk all the time, and they're the ones, because we do this, we keep a lot of our business. And it's like,
that's cool.
There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that you probably think is a waste of time. But if you learned more about it or looked further into it, there's always a reason why you're doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
And if there's not a good reason for it, then maybe don't. But
yeah.
But yeah, there's like weird things that I guess people are just more willing to complain about versus there's probably a good reason why you're doing it. And you should probably just learn why, and it makes sense and give you a different perspective.
Cool. Well, thanks for doing this, and I appreciate all the valuable information you shared with me in the healthcare and pharmacy industry.
Yeah.
I learned a lot, especially because I don't really know much about this at all. So
yeah, it's a weird field, man.
Yeah, it seems like it, but it seems like it's got its highs and lows like any other job.
Yeah, totally.